On Netflix, right? I mean, we up until now, we've talked about what kind of slate the quarter had and what they're going to say about subs. But then the Love is Blind thing happened, and there's been like this budding discussion about whether or not the tech is there to eventually do more aspirational things like live sports.
Well, live has always been a holy grail of this next iteration of streaming. It requires a lot of technology. It requires a lot of investment, and it's hard to do. You know, YouTube has had a lead in the ability to do that when they did their big jump out of the balloon with Red Bull years ago, and no one really has nailed it. But as I watch Amazon and Apple dive into sports, I was surprised that Netflix had that issue because I felt like they would have been very prepared for it.
Right. Do you see a moment where folks start recomputing the cord cutting process and thinking, well, wait a minute, if I really want to see my most treasured content, maybe I can't afford to cut?
Well, I do think, on the other hand, there is such robust content coming from Netflix, and it really is delivering amazing, touch points across so many genres of television and content that is hard to find elsewhere, and that you're getting more and more excited to see. No one else has amassed as much international content. No one else has amassed as much original content as they have in such a short amount of time. So I am still incredibly long on it. I think that is more of a blip that they will figure out and fix. And I do think all of the different ways that they're allowing you to now subscribe, whether it's ad-supported, whether it's a basic tier, whether it's a premium tier, are not going to feel expensive compared to anything else in your life. $7 a month for a trillion hours of content seems pretty darn cheap to me.
Well, so I was going to ask about the ad tier, Ben. If you think Wall Street is right to be so bullish on the ad-supported tier and the crackdown on password sharing.
Well, I am, incredibly pleased, actually, that they're welcoming the advertisers back into the ecosystem. All of television was driven by the idea of selling soap and cigars, whether it was William Paley or the birth of the soap opera. It has always been driven, actually, to drive an advertising medium. And so it was surprising me how much the streamers were resisting advertisers in their ecosystems initially. I understood it from the premium perspective, but now they've come up with this way to tier the selling. And I think advertisers want to be where culture is. And culture emanates from TV, from streaming, from content. Where culture and content come together is where commerce is created. And I see this happening all the time. I'm always talking about the 3 C's in that context. And I think the advertisers are really going to want to be inside these walled environments. They're going to be happy to be inside them. And I think they're going to be able to innovate with these new players.
Speaking of content, the labor strife that we're watching has big ramifications for what kinds of slates will be put together in the coming quarters if they need to start relying more on news or reality. How much is the town talking about that?
I always feel like we're Rupert and Dirty Rotten Scoundrels trying to stick a fork in our eye. Like every day in my industry, we're the people who punch each other out on our biggest Super Bowl event. We're the people who seem to relentlessly make bad choices. And unfortunately, I think this strike, which it seems more and more likely, especially with our brilliant writers now, 98% of them in the core group voting to approve a strike if it actually happens, will be very destructive and will hurt the industry for the near term. But the last go around, it took place and it really accelerated a lot of changes within the industry that were needed. And then it opened back up and the business returned. I just worry right now it could cause even more pain than it did then.
Well, and also what's different right now, Ben, is that all these companies are under pressure from the market and from their shareholders to save on costs and to cut back on the aggressive spending that we had seen in years past.
Well, labor prices keep going up and inflation keeps coming into other parts of the industry. We still are paying huge premiums for COVID protections, which seem out of whack with the rest of the country. And within our production budgets, we have all of this incremental money that's going out the door for daily testing and other things that are really not necessary now in a vaccinated landscape. And so you look at the industry as a whole, and there are cost pressures on one end, and then there are revenue pressures on the other. And where will the two meet? I am incredibly bullish on the long run because so much of this is unlocking opportunities that we as independent players see are so obvious, opportunities to build brands with our distribution partners and actually create product lines and businesses, like I read about the Lacoste Netflix collab, or the shoppable opportunities that Comcast is rolling out and going to bring onto Peacock, transactional advertising. These platforms really will be the ones that drive that. And if you're in an ecosystem like Amazon has created, where you can also click and buy through these services, that's going to unlock a whole new set of revenue. So I'm incredibly bullish in the long run. I think these are all challenges that everyone is facing in the near term and that they will be overcome.